the say it again. Matthew 10, 5 through 8. And what it says in those verses, also in 20 through 23, is freely you have received, freely give. Happy Father's Day. You know, fathers don't get much respect anymore. An old quote by Bill Cosby once observed that boys grow up spending hours throwing the football, taking them to football games and playing football in school. And then finally, one day they become a big college star. And before the big bowl game, they get interviewed by the press. And the first thing they say is, "Hi, Mom." Dads can't get much respect. Fathers don't get that anymore. Think of the TV commercials that you see now. The fathers in the TV commercial are dunce. I mean, they're played as the idiot of the family. In the movies, you usually see the dad, or at least one of the adult men in the movie, is portrayed as the dunce. Fathers can't get a lot of respect. But there's good news on this front. Father's Day isn't all bad. The National Center of Fathering, didn't know that existed, did you? Conducts fathers or Father of the Year essay contests in partnership with local schools and sponsoring organizations. In 2017, 8 contests were held, and altogether, over 250,000 school children submitted essays on the topic, "What My Father Means to Me." Here's a sampling of the essays. First grader writes, "My dad's the best dad there ever was. I'd kiss a pig for him." Another first grader writes, "My dad is a Frito-Lay man. That is an important job because Frito-Lay means chips, which is food, and that is so important because you could not live without food." A third grader writes, "The dad in my life isn't really my dad. He's my grandpa. But he's been like a dad to me since I was born. I hope that as I get older, Grandpa will teach me all about stuff like all he knows about wood, first aid, and everything else he knows about. My grandpa isn't my father, but I wouldn't trade him for all the dads in the world." Fourth grader writes, "Sometimes, as a joke, I put my stinky socks in his briefcase. So at work the next day, he'll think of me. He's always at my concerts and plays. And even though he lives an hour away, he always comes." Fifth grade girl writes, "You know what else my dad does? He braids my hair. I'm the only girl I know who has a dad that braids my hair or their hair. I think that's perfect dad. He already is the world's greatest dad to me. I just wanted everyone to know that." Sixth grader writes, "One time I had an assembly and I was a soloist, and my dad was in the first row. And after my song, I smiled at my dad, and my dad smiled back, and then he cried. That was the best thing I ever saw." 11th grader writes, "Every man can be a dad, but it takes someone special to be a father." So news for dads is not all bad. Still, Father's Day is known as the day grown-up kids call home to speak to dad. If you get a Father's Day present, I hope you all do, it's something. I hope that it's something that you can use. Actually, dads, in monetary terms, what can you children give you that you cannot purchase yourself? In a society as an affluent as ours is, it's a real challenge to give anyone anything they truly need. What do you give to someone that has everything or desires nothing? Now, you and I may feel like we don't have everything, but think about it. Don't we basically have everything we need? Most of the things we want are simply bigger and better variations of what we already have. What do you give to people who have everything? So let's talk about that. Jesus calls his disciples together in Matthew and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. Then he sent them out with these instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, preach this message. Here's the message. The kingdom of heaven is near. Then heal the sick and raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. And then he adds these powerful words. Freely you have received, freely give. Here's the motivation behind all evangelism, all works of justice, all foreign mission. Freely you have received, freely give. That's the first thing we need to see. We have so much. A visitor from a third world country came to the United States. And as he was riding through a subdivision, he noticed a car backing out of a garage, and he said in amazement, "You even have houses for your cars." Will Rogers once said, and this was in the midst of the Great Depression, Rogers, who had been seen grinding poverty in other parts of the world, said of America, "We hold the distinction of being the only nation that ever went to the poorhouse in an automobile." Wow. A guy named Dr. Samuel Zumwalt, heck of a name, he's actually a evangelical preacher for the Lutheran Church in North Carolina. But he tells about one of his friends who was recovering alcoholic. When his friend went on a mission trip to Honduras, her whole world view shifted. She told Dr. Zumwalt, "I've always felt poor since I lost my big 4-bedroom house in a divorce. Then I came to Honduras and saw how the victims of the hurricanes were so thrilled to have these 2-room houses that we were building for them." She said, "I came back to my 600 square foot condominium and saw that I live in a palace compared to them." She said, "I realized I'm rich, and I never knew it until I went to Honduras." We are rich, if we only knew it. That is why we need to listen closely to Jesus' words when he says, freely receive, freely you receive, freely give. Motivational speaker, and most of you have seen this guy or heard of him, Tony Robbins, tells about something life-changing that occurred on a Thanksgiving day many years ago. A young boy woke up with a sense of foreboding. His family was in a dire financial straits. They didn't have much to look forward to that Thanksgiving day, just a meager meal. They were too proud to ask for charity. This led to frustration and harsh words between mom and dad. The boy was devastated to watch his mother and father become more and more angry and depressed with each passing hour. Then suddenly, a loud and totally unexpected knock on the door. Standing there was a tall man in a rumpled shirt, grinning broadly and carrying a huge basket. In that basket was a multitude of good food: turkey, stuffing, rolls, sweet potatoes, canned goods. The man at the door said, "This is from someone who knows you're in need and wants you to know that you are loved and cared for." The father tried to protest But the man holding the basket said, "Hey, I'm just the delivery person. Have a great Thanksgiving." In that brief encounter, Tony Robbins says this young man's life was changed. The kindness of that stranger would never be forgotten. The young man vowed that someday he would repay that grand gesture. By the time the young man was 19 years old, he began to fulfill that promise. That Thanksgiving, with his own earnings, he set out to purchase groceries, not for himself, but for two families that he knew were in need. When he arrived at the first house, he was greeted by a Latino woman with 6 children. Her husband had abandoned the family only 2 days before, and they had no food. You can imagine the pandemonium when this young man went to his car, came back bringing turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, canned goods, and all the things that he brought to that family to eat for Thanksgiving. The children shrieked, and the woman started exclaiming, "You a gift from God, you a gift from God." "No," said the young man, "I'm just the delivery boy. This is a gift from a friend." The young man was sharing with others because someone first shared with him. Actually, this is a personal story of Tony Robbins. He was the boy who was stressed out over the family lack of food for Thanksgiving and the basket, and the man who turned around and began giving out these baskets. Robbins did the same thing at 19 years of age, and he became a motivational speaker, and he achieved astounding success. Robbins also started a foundation that has given Thanksgiving baskets to hundreds of thousands of people over the years. "Freely you have received," said Jesus, "freely give." We're rich if we only knew it. That is why we need to listen closely to Jesus' words. Here is the motivation of all good works. And Jesus' words, "freely you have received," is the motivation. Of course, when Jesus spoke these words to his disciples, he was not talking about financial blessings. He was not talking about spiritual blessings that the disciples received through him. He was talking about his love, his grace, and his peace. He is asking them to go out into the world and share the faith that he had nurtured in the disciples themselves. Pastor Daniel, another good name here, Witnowski, tells about a coffee mug that he found in a gift shop at an abbey. He says that he paid a ridiculous price for it. That was because the inscription on the side of the mug got his interest. It read like this: "God danced the day we were born. You are loved. You are beautiful. You are a gift of God. You are his own possession. You are a gift to all mankind, God's gift of love to them." Daniel figured, shoot, I can pay $40 for a cup. And thus he says, against all odds, that is about the most expensive coffee cup he ever owned. But he claims that this mug is now one of the most valuable things he owns because it reminds him of the mission of Jesus to share the message that every human being is loved, beautiful, a gift of God, and is a gift to humankind. Have you ever thought of yourself like that? You ever considered that? You and I are loved by God. This makes us spiritually rich. If only we knew it. We have treasures that are not dependent on the stock market or the size of your bank account or the value of your house. We are rich because we are loved. We are loved by other people, and we are loved by God. We are particularly mindful of our family relations on a special occasion such as Father's Day. To know that we are loved is the greatest gift we can receive from a parent or from a child. But to know we have a heavenly parent who loves us is the most wonderful gift of all. In 1997, a soldier in Jordan went on a rampage. He shot and killed 7 Israeli schoolgirls who were on a field trip to Island of Peace, which is a park on the Jordan River between Israel and Jordan. 2 of the girls were killed on the spot. The others were taken to the Jordanian hospital, but later died, some due to mistreatment. In the midst of anguish and anger and alienation, without a warning, the King Hussein, king of Jordan, the king of whose country the crazy gunman lived, left his throne, left his palace, left his very country without notifying photographers and journalists, and entered the homes of the families of the slain girls. King Hussein, in all his majesty and grandeur, entered each of the modest homes of these grieving families and fell on his knees. He bowed down before them, and each home he looked into the eyes of the mother, the father, the sisters, the brother, all people who were grieving the loss of each young girl. And he said, I beg you, forgive me. Your daughter is like my daughter. Your loss is like my loss. May God help you bear your pain. And the king, humbled before them, stood up and walked out to go back to his country and back to his sovereignty. This king, this Muslim king, gave us an image of the relationship with Christ. The God of all the universe humbled himself and came into our world to show us how much he loved us. And now it's our job to take that love to others. Freely you have received, freely give. In 1995, Cal Ripken Jr. broke what many believe was baseball's unbreakable record. Lou Gehrig's record for consecutive games played, 2,130. Known as baseball's all-time Iron Man, Ripken retired from baseball in 2001 after 21 seasons with the Baltimore Orioles. His name appears in all the record books repeatedly, most notably as one of the only 7 players in history to amass 400 home runs and 3,000 hits. Ripken regularly gives credit for all of his accomplishments to the example and teaching of his father, Cal Ripken Sr. Cal Ripken Sr. was a former baseball player, coach, and scout for the Orioles. And in 87 and 88, Cal Ripken Sr. managed the Orioles, and both Cal Ripken Jr. and his brother Billy played on the team. This is first in baseball history. In 1996, Cal Ripken Sr. was inducted into the Orioles Hall of Fame, and Cal Ripken Jr. was asked to say a few words about his father. It was an emotional moment, and the young man struggled to find just the right words. Finally, not being able to say anything for a long moment, he said, I think I'll tell a story. The story was about his children. Cal Ripken Jr. had a daughter named Rachel that was 6 years old, and her brother Ryan was 3. And they had been quarreling and bickering for weeks. And one day, Ripken Jr. heard Rachel taunt Ryan. She said, "You're just trying to be like Daddy." After a few moments, Cal Ripken asked Rachel, "What's wrong with trying to be like Dad?" When he had finished telling this story and memorializing his dad, Cal Ripken Jr. looked up at his father and he said, "That's what I've always tried to do." You see, there was an example made, an example of someone's life. Here's something interesting. Several years ago, there was a popular trend among Christians that encouraged them to ask WWJD, what would Jesus do? You remember that. Bracelets, t-shirts, merchandise featuring this all over the place. What many people did not know is that the question came from 1896 novel In His Steps, written by Charles Sheldon. The book's storyline follows a group of people who vowed to live for a year, making no decision without first asking themselves, what would Jesus do? To be a follower, a disciple of Christ is, in essence, the Christian life. We want to be like him. We can never share in Jesus' deity, but we can share in his holiness. One day we will be perfected in his holiness, but only until then we should do our best to follow example of obedience. The title of Sheldon's book comes from 1 Peter 2:21, which tells us that believers should follow in his steps. While this is good general advice, in context, Peter refers to a specific situation. The larger passage reads, "If you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps." He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. And when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. 1 Peter 2:20-23. A person who does good and is unjustly punished for it, and who then accepts the mistreatment without retaliation, is following in Jesus' steps. Asking the question, what would Jesus do, on every decision you make, is not a bad idea. However, there are some branches of liberal Christianity that see the primary purpose of Jesus' life as providing an example to follow. Unfortunately, this seems to have been the theology behind Sheldon's book, although the novel is still profitable and thought-provoking. But Jesus did give us an example to follow. But rather than asking, what would Jesus do? It would be better to ask, what does Jesus want me to do? Because he is more than an example. He is your Lord and your God. And that is what Christ expects out of his disciples. He expects us to try to be like Dad. To be like our Heavenly Father, who gave himself so completely for the world. freely you have received all of this, freely give. That's our challenge. Get her done.